hurt and free from hurting others. He must not do anything by means of which the tragedies of life are magnified. He must have the very kindest and most gentle attitude towards everything. He must realize the importance of being at peace even in the midst of chaos. This type of thing and this realization of what should be then helps the individual to gain this equilibrium, and he becomes a knight errant. He becomes one dedicated to the service of the system, the Grail system, the Goddess system, the orders of the quest, the orders of the bath, and all the great orders of chivalry. The search for the Golden Fleece, which is the great order of chivalry in Europe, on the continent, is again the same thing. The Golden Fleece is the ray of light flowing from the Lamb of God. So all these things tie in, and little by little we begin to reverse the sources of our inspiration and influence. But we also have to have the courage and discrimination to know when we can even accept our own attitudes. And the only way we can do that is to be so selfless that there is no way in which we can be tempted to misuse any knowledge that comes to us. After this, we come to the truly meditational problem. Having cleansed the heart and mind from all traces of ulterior attitudes, the individual can for the first time come into the state of prayer. Prayer up to that time is just a conversation, usually with the lower part of yourself. But when that part is no longer there, prayer becomes a contact with the highest inspirational levels of consciousness. And because these inspirational levels have the power to perfect or rationalize or make whole all the disasters of the flesh, prayers are answered by the constant increasing of the divine consciousness within the person. Little by little, the divine takes over. And where the divine takes over, there is no longer any need for prayer, because the individual lives constantly in the light of God. So in the continuing of these thinkings, we come to the period of beginning to be useful. We must have some kind of a cause. The knight without a cause is in serious trouble. But the cause is dedication to whatever is necessary in life. Now this brings in a point that seems to be inconsistent. And from the outside it is inconsistent. But there is an inner meaning to it, which we find has a consistency. We are taught to purify ourselves and to free ourselves from worldliness, and yet we are also taught to turn back and serve those who are in worldliness. We have to go back to feed the hungry, cleanse the leper, heal the sick, and according to the teachings of Christ, finally to raise the dead. Therefore, we have a job here, even though we are outgrowing here. And the reason why we feel this need for this commitment is because the persons who are in trouble are usually not able at that time to sustain themselves. A person in sorrow or trouble is sorrowful or troubled because they do not have the internal light to rise above this type of thing. Therefore, comfort and consolation is important to them, but it must be given always in the sense of a reality. It can never be the individual being taught to do things he shouldn't do because they'll make him happy. Always the motives must be unselfish, and the advice, suggestions, recommendations, or assistance must always be in the terms of helping the person to grow. The growth must come before true freedom from pressure is possible. On the way up from this point, we have the Hindu yoga, we have all the Zen teachings, we have everything in which the person gradually comes into the full control of his own inner life. There's this Zen fable of the old Zen master who, having attained a very great degree of meditation, was walking quietly along the shores of a river, the banks of a river. And thoughtlessly, because his mind was on other things, he walked right out onto the river. And he walked all the way across without even his feet being wet. If, however, he had suddenly realized what he was doing, he'd have probably sunk to the bottom of the river. But while his heart and consciousness were above the level and restrictions of the body, he was safe. And I think to some degree this has to explain firewalking and other phenomena of ancient peoples and still experiences that are still carried on in our modern world. Namely, that if the individual can become completely unaware of fear, unaware of failure, unaware of any self-interest, or unaware of pride, which might be damaged by a failure, gradually what we might term the impossible becomes real, as Christ walking on the waters, which of course is a symbol of the Christ in you, walking upon the surface of the torrents and the tempests, unmoved by material circumstances. So gradually the Church of the Holy Grail concept is the person gradually becoming part of an assemblage of the enlightened. This assemblage of the enlightened we find in the mythology of Egypt and of Greece and of most ancient peoples. Like the mysterious mountain in the tablet of Cebes, the person rises finally to a mysterious and wonderful castle on the top of the mountain. This is the castle of the inner life, the consciousness. This is the castle that is referred to in alchemy as the shut palace of the king. It is the divine acacia, the place of wisdom, love, and veneration. So little by little we climb up and do what in the Buddhist philosophy means that we ascend to the level or degree of bodhisattvahood, where we become dedicated patrons, guardians, and protectors of all that live. We also become the agents and means of a tremendous dedication, a tremendous service. And it is a service that becomes all important, and nothing else is important at all. So little by little, the conquest of self brings with it the only true happiness that exists in this world. And this happiness does not exist completely in this world, because it comes to those who, while they live in this world, have attained an understanding and insight of something higher and more wonderful. Now, the story of the cup, of course, has a series of meanings. The cup is the San Grail, or the Holy Cup, or the Sangre Real, which is the container of the blood of Christ. It also has been represented in various forms, and in a safe deposit box in New York, there is what is called the Great Chalice of Antioch, which is supposed to be a magnificent work of art containing, woven and built into its substance, the original Holy Grail. But the Church of the Holy Grail, as the mystics understood it, cannot accept this, because the cup simply never existed as a cup. If it was a pewter cup or clay cup which Christ drank from, it was probably long forgotten and broken. But the symbol of it is eternal. Here is the cup which contains the ever-flowing blood of consciousness. Here is the life of the human being, a life sustained forever, a life flowing into everything that lives and creating the great sacrament of the Eucharist. The sacrament of the Eucharist had to be experienced in the search for the Grail. It was the last of the hallows, the last of the great dedications. And in this, the symbol of the Eucharist, we have the representation of the ever-flowing life and light of redemption, flowing into everything that lives. Further than that, that life itself, by which we all live, and without which none of us can live, the very energy within our bodies, the very power to be or to exist, is due to the continuing source of strength, of vitality, and of life, which flows from the eternal. We are all alive by virtue of the fact that life exists, and life in its existence is a manifestation of redemption, salvation, regeneration, and the resurrection of the dead. So we have a certain sense of duty. The very energy by which we get up in the morning is not our own. The energy we argue with a neighbor about is not our own. The unkind words we energize are a misuse of energy. The waste of energy, the depletion of the resources of the body through evil habits, narcotics, drugs, and all these things, all of these are the corruption of a divine power. They are the misuse of the actual presence of God in us at all times. If it was not for that presence, we would be lumps of clay. We cannot exist unless life sanctions and justifies our existence. It was this life that fashioned us. It is this life that sustains us. It's from this life we came, and it is to this life we go. And this life is the entire mystery of the Grail quest. It is the quest for the everlastingness which is behind all things as an attribute of deity. The mystic, therefore, very often says that he does not die, that when the time comes for him to depart from this life, some mysterious miracle occurs and he doesn't die. The physical interpretation of this has very little substance in reality. The only one who didn't and cannot die is the one who finally was the eternal itself. Therefore, all things have their comings and their goings. But the alchemist and the mystic was taught that the transition from this world to the next is not a death, and the perfect acceptance of life overcomes the illusion of the reality of death. In other words, that in which life exists may be transformed. The body of it may be changed. The life may be incorporated into other creatures, but life itself cannot die. And life has, by its own energy, produced the evolution of the various kingdoms of nature, including man. That life does not die. The life in the individual cannot die. But it can depart from the body. But this departure is not death. It is transition into another dimension of space. Therefore, the search for the Grail not only continues throughout the material life, but the attainment of the degrees of manifestation that are possible to the human being allows this process to continue, and the individual who in this world passes out in a state of dedicated reality finds himself in another great room in the house or castle of the Holy Grail. Because the Holy Grail stands for those other mansions referred to, by which man is ultimately to ascend to the fulfillment of his own purposes in the divine life of things. Jesus says, "In my Father's house are many mansions. Were it not so, I would have told you." And these many mansions are the rooms of the castle of the Grail, invisible but eternal. In the ancient Hebraic mysticism, the Temple at Jerusalem is said to have been built on the top of Mount Moriah, on the threshing floor of the Jebusite. But the real Temple of Jerusalem is in the sky above. And the real Temple of the Grail is not in or with any church on earth, but is above them. And that which is eternal is always dominant, always leads all things. Now, many people, including the Gnostics and the Neoplatonists, tried to find ways to accomplish this release from the ignorance and struggle of materialism into this path that does lead to final emancipation. Therefore, they attempted to create something that was not creedal, not denominational, not tied to any religion, but was essentially the essence of all of them. Because all religion has one essential purpose. That is, that the individual shall come to perfection and union with deity. All religions were paths leading to God. And the Neoplatonists and others found that this became a very wonderful basis for a unity which we do not suspect. If all these paths all lead to the same end, then all denominational and creedal inequality is meaningless. The individual, wherever sincerity dwells, God dwells with us and has helping and leading us to the better way of life. So on the basis of this fact, the Gnostics and the Persians and several others created the concept of the great religion in space, that there was one eternal spiritual science. There was one great church, one great cathedral. It might have all different names. It might be worshipped by 1,000 different sects, but they all, without knowing it or with some hope, without any understanding, they all are on pilgrimage to the same house, the house of hidden places, itself hidden. Every material aspiration is a step forward in the journey toward the universal church, the church which never began as far as man is concerned and will never end as long as there is need anywhere for the grace of God to be disseminated throughout creation. So this idea was developed gradually until it became this over-faith. And it was very valuable during periods of religious persecution, because there were many generations in which all effort at piety could lead to martyrdom. All dedications to outside sects led to frightful wars, terrible abuses, religious persecutions, and fanaticisms. And all of these terrible incidents faced the individual whenever he tried to express any functional or organized religious belief. Therefore, the true religion was held in secret. All of these outward forms of it were symbols of its own inner mystery. The symbols were obvious to those who understood, and those who did not understand could gradually enlighten their inner life until the understanding came to them. But it was better for the realization that in this world there has never been but one religion, and that religion is set forth in the great spiritual and moral codes of humanity. And it has been disseminated throughout the world by religious teachers, by messiahs, by saviors, by martyrs, who have given everything to bring the code to earth, to bring the reality to earth. But the religion itself remains undivided, and all who seek to find the sacred altar of the Grail, the Parsifals and the Galahads, all have to come in the end to the same altar. But even if they do, they may not know it. They may not realize at all that it's the same. But the point is that in their inner lives they are doing the same things, and they're doing them essentially in the same ways, but perhaps have different names for them. Thus, every virtue is a universal quality which cannot be divided. It spreads itself through everything that lives and exists, whereas every vice is a local situation. It is something that exists for a little time in certain places due to misunderstandings. But the more you put vices together, the more they battle each other, until one vice destroys another, as two wars will destroy each other. But virtues, wherever they are, feed each other. For in virtues there is always peace and harmony. Therefore, virtues are eternal and immortal. Vices are temporal and mortal. And by releasing the mind and heart from the vices, we become again in the presence of the realities. So the Church of the Holy Grail is the invisible sanctuary of truth, the real heart of God. And the real heart of God is the eternal love of deity, disseminated through all the worlds and all the spheres of existence. And this love has its particular and proper abode in the heart of each of us. It is this love in the heart which is the Redeemer. And in this case, the blood of God in our own hearts is really blood flowing in a grail or cup. The heart itself is the vessel in which the living blood of God is forever disseminated throughout the world. Gradually coming to understand these things doesn't in any way interfere with practical experiences of living. It simply dedicates them. It baptizes actions and circumstances. The blood of truth baptizes every action that we make in our daily existence. So on the path went, and it was believed that in the course of time the mystery of the Grail would be solved. But in Europe, the light of truth began to fade out. For a long time, men neglected the inner truth of things, and therefore it was said that the angels took the Grail out of Europe and brought it finally to Asia. The Western issue is that it was brought to Glastonbury, where it is buried somewhere. It is hidden as a symbol of the physical perfection of life. The chances are that physically it was not taken to either place, because it is not a physical thing. It is simply the chalice of spiritual ecstasy. It's the mystery of the entheos, of the foreverness in God, which we call enthusiasm, which originally was the sacred emotion of man's complete acceptance of God. So all these little stories and big stories and legends, old and new, all seem to tell us that there is the Church of the Holy Grail, the Church of Parzival on Montsalvat on the heights of Spain, the mysterious lands and gods of the Nordic peoples, and Valhalla, the abode of heroes. Everywhere we find the same thing: the Olympus of the Greek, the Meru of India, the Shambhala of Tibet. These are all symbols of the secret church, the mysterious sanctuary which forever remains, and to which each aspiring soul comes in search of reality. In each generation, the number of those who make the search increases. Little by little, the journey is more generally understood. Also, in the cases of those who have advanced a little way and have found peace and have found kindness and have come to love that which they once either hated or ignored, these people are leaven in a loaf. Each of those who becomes a knight of the Grail becomes a defender of the faith, a defender of all that is good in humanity. and all that is worthwhile in the mystery of life itself. Therefore, each of the mystics that comes along, mystics like Bami, or any of the ancient mystics of Egypt, Greece, great philosophers, Plato, Pythagoras, Socrates, all these had gone a little way and had become acolytes, so to say, in this sacred assembly. And yet they didn't recognize the sacred assembly as a separate thing at all. This mysterious church of the Holy Grail has the earth itself for its checkerboard floor. The great combinations of integrities and honor are the columns that rise above the floor of the sanctuary, and the arches of the dome, as one writer said, are the clasped hands of comrades. The whole church is a living thing. It is humanity. It is that which must gradually come to be the most worshipful and the most purposeful of all human institutions. We are going to have to move away from the concept that the material world is the reality, and that according to how things go here, so they go hereafter. We have got to come finally to the recognition that this world is a sanctuary itself. Every part of it is part of one sacred house. This sacred house is the home of all kinds of living things. And in this home, which is the one great church, many little churches have been built by persons of various convictions and dedications. But after all, the earth itself, the solar system, the cosmos, all are sanctuaries. It is a mistake to think of any of them as materialistic, mechanical devices. The earth is not just simply a physical planet with an atmosphere extending a few miles from its surface. The solar system is not a machinery of planets. Cosmos is not a mechanism of stars. These are all parts of great eternal principles manifesting forever. And it's man's possibility to climb the ladder of stars, to go on and on and on until he becomes fully aware of his place in the universe of things. And this search to the knowledge or awareness of realities, of course, is the quest of the Grail. It is the continuing struggle of all that lives to grow. Birds, animals, insects, everything have the great pressure to survive. And for man and for all creatures, true survival is not the survival of the body, but the survival of the God within the body. We are all concerned with the myth of the dying God and the resurrection of that God through our own personal contribution to the integrities of the world. And as we gather a little bit here in Christmas time, it might be valuable to realize some of these points, that we are living in a world of divine potential. There is nothing that is necessary to us that is not available. But we cannot come to the greater while we cling desperately to the lesser. We cannot be gods and mortals at the same time. Actually, we never were mortals in the truest sense of the word. We have always been gods in disguise. At the moment, we are gods in distress. Difficulties and problems are gathering around us. But behind, within, and about all of these is this immense sanctuary of life. Universes going on, cosmic systems going on, galaxies going on, and all that exists, the living church of the Grail, the one tremendous structure of universal integrities. You can't join it in the ordinary sense of paying dues. It's not interested in dues, but it does have something about it. It wants nothing, needs nothing, and can use nothing but the best of each of us. That which is the true reality in us can become part of the great congregation of the Grail. And this congregation is dedicated in many ways to the service of eternal truth. Truth must always have hands and feet in order to function in a world of hands and feet. Where there are no hands and feet, it has other members. But here, each dedicated person helps to release or perfect the great plan of life to which we all belong. And the mystics of Europe seem to have understood this. The mystics came to realize in the end that the whole symbolism, the whole emblemata of things, is a single story, the story of the eternal quest of that which alone can bring peace. The peace of nations, the peace of families, the peace of individuals, all must come from ennobling of human character. Now, we don't all feel very much like ennobling things here and there, at least. And the problem of a world dedicated to ennobling character seems a long way away. But after all, the gods move quietly, and like the millstones of the gods, universal nature grinds slowly, but actually very fine in the last analysis. And all this problem that we face is just part of the individual finding the way he has to go. We say these are very bad times, but perhaps they are the best times that we have ever had, because for the first time we are facing problems that must be solved. We can no longer run them under the edge of a rug somewhere. We can no longer migrate to another continent to get away from persecution or the pressures of life. We have to face them now. And with the proper enlightenment, each one will become worthy of knighthood in this story of human progress. We all must now begin to think, as we never have before, of what constitutes integrities. We will have to decide whether we want to go on making mistakes and suffering, or whether it would be more comfortable to change our own ways and let the light of truth lead us in the direction we should go. So stressful times are good times. And in the story of the Grail, the knights were not only sworn to this service, but they had a knight errantry, for they had the sword of quick detachment. They had not only love and wisdom, but the courage to defend the right. And this courage to defend the right, however, is always in need of a definition of what is right. To defend the right means to always stand for the truth. To defend the right means to come to the aid of truth where it is endangered, if it is in our power to do so. To defend the right does not mean to keep things going the way we want them to in a material sense, but to defend the right is to prove to ourselves and others that eternal principles rule forever, and that those who are the true honored Christian soldiers are the ones who will defend the integrities of life, regardless of the cost to themselves in material concerns. Christ gave one great commandment to his followers, a new commandment: love one another. Now this is the voice of heaven speaking, and there will be no peace on earth until that divine emotion is firmly established in the hearts of human beings. No great miracle is going to bring it. The great miracle will come in each individual life when suddenly comes the realization of the meaning of it all. All study, all matters of personal improvement, all religious and philosophical research, all these things are to help us to get into a condition of consciousness in which it is possible for this mystery of enlightenment to occur. The mystics, with their illuminations, were brought into an emotional, spiritual contact with the integrities of life. They suddenly saw the air and the land beneath their feet, the waters, all these things as living testimonies of an eternal reality. They heard the cry of the bird. They heard all of the signs and symbols. They watched the mother watch her young. They watched all the beauties of life and realized that these are the great symbols of the divine purpose, and that it is up to us to live in the light of truth if we wish this purpose to finally lead the world into peace, security, and honor. The honor must come first in ourselves. And though we may say it is difficult, we can say that many can fall upon the right hand and many upon the left. But if we are just, we will stand. We will survive in the great pattern of things, because it is so ordained. And those who are faithful unto little things will be made masters over greater things. We must be faithful to the reformation of ourselves. And as this is accomplished, we will be given larger tasks and greater opportunities to be of value to our world and to the powers that created it. So at this Christmas time, the idea that the whole universe is just one church, and that the voices of angels can rise only when human beings and universal beings everywhere pay homage to the eternal altar of the human and divine souls. All this was part of something that was taught 2,000 years ago. But people didn't really listen too well then, and they're not listening too well at the moment. But they're going to have to learn to listen. For the things we all dream of, the hopes we all have, the future we want for our children, the blessed values to people all over the world who are now suffering tyranny, martyrdom, and destruction. All these conditions can only be cured when the love of God and the love of man are strong in each of us, and that we are dedicated to this service of universal cooperation with each other and dedication to the will of heaven. With these commitments, we'll make it. And we're going to make it, no matter how long it takes. But if we really try a little harder, it won't take quite so long. And we hope the next year will bring to many people the realization that there is a peace, that things can be solved, but only when the individual stands firm for the principles that he believes and realizes that he is always at Mass in the cathedral of the universe. If he gets this idea firmly fixed, things will go much better for him. Well, folks, thank you very much. And I hope for all of you a very, very Merry Christmas, a very Happy New Year, and a very deep study of yourselves. And if all these things are done, things will improve. And there is not one seed that can be planted which will not contribute to the ultimate harvest. We're all working at it. Keep going, folks.